I watched the debate between Jackson Hinkle and Vaush, and I found Jackson to be really annoying. He refused to commit to a position. He refused to actually have a conversation, and he was constantly shifting his talking points. I'll give you a little taste of it.
The investigators who are on the ground, there is the potential that there was a non-chemical related attack.
A non-chemical related attack?
Yes, because
like
we both agree that there were over 40 people who died, correct?
That is correct. So were bombs were dropped, or what kind of attack? The city was being shelled at the time. Are you saying that it was artillery fire?
I'm not. They weren't able to identify that. You can see very clearly, though, that the people who were filmed at the scene had foam protruding from their mouths, but they weren't able to identify that. And I'm not going to act like me, being some YouTube streamer, has any more information on the subject than what they have provided. But they did leave open the avenue that there was a non-chemical related attack, and they also said they weren't able to find any sort of outlying evidence that suggested that there was a chemical attack that wasn't sarin or chlorine.
So, was there a chemical attack, yes or no? People were frothing at the mouth. That would seem to suggest there's a chemical attack. But, right away you realize, this guy's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Okay, we'll get to that, don't worry. Okay, so your argument then is that there was no chemical weapons attack, but there may have been a conventional attack.
No, that's not what I just said.
Okay, would you mind repeating? Because I need you to commit to a position, because if your position here is we have questions, then I don't even have a position to attack, and I'll just list out all the evidence. So
Vaush,
you being
this is the third time I'm going to have to answer this question. The inspectors told us that there was no chlorine gas release that caused this attack. That's what the evidence shows us.
So there you get a taste of his argumentational style. He'll give these non-answers, and then he'll assert, oh, for the third time, for the fourth time, this is my answer. But he never gives a good, clear answer. So, it's kind of frustrating to talk to a guy like that.
So, if it was a non-chlorine-based attack, why were there 32 or so corpses found with death markers representative of death by chlorine poisoning? The foaming at the mouth is caused by the acids that form when chlorine gas comes into contact with moisture, like moisture in our throats and in our eyes. That's how they died. I can't show these pictures or videos on stream because they're highly graphic, but there are videos taken at the time and afterwards of corpses piled up in these buildings with death markers that are directly indicative of the causes of chlorine gas poisoning. Were they killed by shells and then somebody spray canned foam in their mouth, or enough to convincingly trick medic crisis teams, or how would that have happened?
So, you just alleged that the symptoms of the victims were indicative of a chlorine attack. Is that what you're saying?
For the corpses, the fact that they were foaming at the mouth, that is absolutely consistent with the symptoms of chlorine death, and not trauma or shelling. Yes.
So
being shelled will not cause that.
So that would be consistent with a mass chlorine attack, like what we've seen happen in previous world wars, where you have huge clouds of chlorine that are consuming regions of war for hours on end. It's not indicative of what took place here. And according to the toxicologists who are again on the ground in Douma, and who met with some of the leading international experts on toxicology, one of which was from a NATO state, they found that with respect to the consistency of the observed and reported symptoms of the alleged victims with possible exposure to chlorine gas or similar, the experts were conclusive in their statements that there was no correlation between symptoms and chlorine exposure. In particular, they stated that the onset of excessive frothing as a result of pulmonary edema observed in photos and reported by witnesses would not occur in the short time period between reported occurrence of the alleged incident and the time the videos were recorded.
Which is interesting because it was later indicated in criticisms of the report that came from my side of the aisle, from people who do believe that this actually took place, that no, those conditions can actually take place in as little as 30 minutes, depending on the concentration of the chlorine gas in the air. Now, conveniently for my narrative, these bombs were dropped in enclosed areas. These weren't dropped into the street. They were dropped into a roof in a bedroom, meaning that the chlorine gas exposure was in a highly concentrated area.
So there were
Additionally,
open windows, there was an
also
open
witness
roof.
testimony of a green cloud shortly after the dropping of these canisters. Now, highly dispersed chlorine gas wouldn't produce visual effects like that, but highly concentrated chlorine gas would. There are witness testimonies of people dropping dead within seconds of the drop of the bomb. This is consistent with a highly pressurized and highly contained release of chlorine gas.
I'm curious
into an
what those
enclosed
sources
space.
are. Are those the white helmets?
No, those are not the white helmets.
Who are they? Who are those sources?
If you'd like, you can give me a moment and I can look up the specifics of the witness testimony.
Okay. Also, I mean, I think it's important to point out that the toxicologists who were reporting on this, they did rule out chlorine gas, as I just said. Do you happen to know more than the international leading toxicologists who are reporting on this?
This is another interesting element of conspiracism that I like.
So no.
Your claim is that the OPCW reports are flawed. That's the entire claim you're making here. My claim is that the toxicologists were incorrect. You're making the inaccurate assumption that the only ways in which the OPCW could possibly be incorrect are against the narrative of the Syrian government. I disagree.
I'm not alleging that. I'm alleging that the final report omitted. I'm alleging. No, you just said that I said something which I didn't say. I'm alleging that the final report. I'm alleging that the final report omitted key information that the toxicologists, engineering and ballistic experts, and the fact-finding mission team members found on the ground, and by omitting that information, they sharply deviated from the findings of the initial investigators who were on the ground and used it to paint an outcome that insinuated that a chlorine gas attack was responsible, when the toxicologists, as I just read you, said that it was not possible.
So, yes, you do believe that the OPCW report was inaccurate. I believe that there are inaccuracies.
I believe they
also
omitted
present.
information.
So wait,
That's
hold on
different.
again. Wait, hold on. This is the
That's
selective
different. It's
credibility
different.
that I'm contesting right now. Essentially, when information lines up in a way that's inconvenient to your narrative, you can explain it away with internal bias, meddling, corruption,
Vaush, these
or with
inspectors
censorship.
are not politically minded. These are international
I know
experts.
you're upset, but I need you to.
These are
just hold on
international experts.
And take it one claim. So you keep saying international experts. So were all of the people who found that there was a chlorine weapons attack. The OPCW was not the only organization at the ground on Douma, by the way, nor the other locations of chemical weapons attacks in Syria. You keep referring to international experts. Buddy, the international experts have already agreed. This was a chemical weapons attack. If you're going to defer towards
the
international
US
expertise,
Vaush,
the world already agrees with me.
Vaush,
so
the
you're
US
not going to have to rely on that, all right?
Vaush, the
Let's
US,
just
the
take
UK,
this a
and
second at a
France
time,
all
okay?
Vaush, the US, the UK, and France all pointed to the OPCW to lead the investigation into this. And the investigation omitted key information that was found by the inspectors.
You keep repeating this, but we haven't even gotten to that yet. And what you're saying is
well, you
also
keep
inaccurate,
misinterpreting
okay?
what I'm saying. I don't know if it's because you're daft or it's because you can't hear me.
Remember, the question that I initially asked you was, how did all of these corpses with foam at their mouths show up with deaths that are consistent with the effects of chlorine gas exposure?
They're not. I just read to you that the reported this is according to the toxicologist, that the observed and reported symptoms of the alleged victims with possible exposure to chlorine gas or similar, the experts were conclusive in their statements that there was no correlation between the symptoms and chlorine exposure. So I don't know why you keep alleging that they were consistent with chlorine exposure when the world's leading toxicologists have said that they are not.
So what else happened to them?
They didn't identify it because they were forced off of the they were forced off the investigation.
So this is not correct. So let's break down some possibilities here. So there's a claim then that an alternate source of death might have been the product, like something else might have killed them. What could have killed them that would have led to there being foam on their mouths and to demonstrate all of the symptoms of pulmonary edema? Keep in mind, the testimony of the toxicologists was not that these deaths' symptoms were inconsistent with chlorine gas, only that the symptoms demonstrated rapidly compared to what is expected with heavy exposure to chlorine gas. So the symptoms are consistent, only not within the time scale the toxicologists defined.
No,
This has been
I'm gonna
tested by
repeat it.
other people since.
I'm gonna
For
repeat it.
example,
I'm gonna you
please,
just made a statement.
Professor,
You just made a statement.
wait,
You
no,
just made a
wait, we need
statement.
to- I need
You
to
just
finish
made a
the
statement.
claim.
You
You can
just made a
address the
statement.
claim when it's
You just
done,
made a statement,
okay?
and I'm gonna refute that. So you said
Oh,
that
no.
it's due to the time frame. I'm gonna repeat the toxicologist findings one more time for you here. They said, and I'm not cherry picking here. They said that the experts were conclusive in their statements that there was no correlation between symptoms and chlorine exposure. Okay? That's the sentence.
Okay.
Okay, did you notice that cute little thing that Jackson did by turning down and distorting Vaush's sound? I think he did it on purpose, but who knows. But anyway, what Vaush is alleging is that if you release massive amounts of chlorine gas, in an enclosed space, people are gonna get symptoms of frothing and that very, very quickly. And even Jackson at this point has admitted that, during World War I, people did get frothing out of the mouth from chlorine gas. So, it's good to keep track of that. And as far as being inside a building, I think everyone's aware that, people who smoke, they need to go outside. And if you smoke outside, nobody cares. But if you smoke in a building, people will get really, really mad at you. I think everyone understands that.
Evidence exists of pulmonary edema taking place near instantly in severe concentrations of chlorine gas. Since chlorine gas
So
was
no. That
concentrated in the
depends.
building,
That depends on the
assuming that it was
concentration
Wait,
of
hold on.
chlorine. It
Wait,
depends
wait,
on the
please,
concentration of chlorine.
assuming that it was released at all, considering that it was contained within the building and that it's heavier than air and that the death took place in the lower level, this is a very strong indication that if chlorine gas was released, it would have been able to be released in amounts significant enough to cause pulmonary edema.
So
In
Vaush,
short, these toxicologists were working off limited information. Which
that's
is why this
that's
isn't
not
a
an
report.
accurate
These are
characterization.
minutes
That
from
is
a
not an
preliminary
accurate
meeting.
characterization. Vaush, for the frothing to develop, they would have had to been there for a prolonged period of time based on the concentration of chlorine. The sources that you're citing referring to instantaneous deaths from chlorine exposure are in world wars where you have massive clouds of chlorine consuming open war fields and sinking into trenches where troops are stationed. This is completely different. We had open roofs, open windows, and 2 cylinders.
Okay, like I said before, if people want to smoke, they have to go outside. You don't stay in the building and smoke. And what Vaush is alleging is, what the scenario is that cylinders were dropped onto the buildings and the chlorine gas leaked into the buildings. So when Jackson is talking about chlorine gas seeping down into trenches, he's talking about outside. This is inside, so the concentrations would be even higher. And this is one of those moments where you're not sure if Jackson is too stupid to understand that, if he's arguing in bad faith, or he's just obsessed with owning Vaush. I don't know, but, inside, if you drop cylinders with gas, the concentration is going to be much, much higher. In the same way that if you smoke inside, the concentration of smoke will be higher than if you smoke outside. I don't understand how anyone cannot understand this.
But the evidence shows that there's actually plenty of circumstantial, surrounding conditions which may have led to it developing much faster than 2 to 4 hours, possibly within 30 minutes. So with all that said, can we get back to the original question? How did corpses with foaming mouths get there?
I would love to get back to that original question, but your premise that there would be
you didn't even
your
answer
premise,
it.
your premise that there would be a rapid onset of pulmonary edema is completely reliant upon the concentration of chlorine.
True, the concentration of chlorine would be very important. And if Jackson Hinkle, was able to hold 2 thoughts in his head, he would know that, his friend, Aaron Mate, who he considers to be infallible on this, even he said they haven't established how much chlorine was released into the buildings.
Because, by the way, the amount of chlorine that actually entered the building it's not established, but...
So how can Jackson be comfortable saying that there wasn't enough chlorine in the building to produce the pulmonary edema, if even his boy, Aaron Mate, says the concentration wasn't established. It seems kind of absurd. But, just watch some more. You'll see some more Weasley evasion from Jackson Hinkle.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. But we were only talking about the
Stoked. I can't
potential for
wait.
pulmonary edema being evident in cases like this. Obviously, we'll talk about the likelihood of chlorine being released later, but we have to get to this point by point. We're only on this point because you couldn't answer the question, why are there corpses with foam?
Vaush, I literally just did answer the question, I think 4 or 5 times. I gave you my answer. Do you remember it?
Did he answer why there are corpses with foam? I don't remember that.
I said exactly what the inspectors on the ground found.
How did they get there? I don't want what the inspectors found because the evidence sides with me. I want your alternative explanation for what took place.
I don't allege to have that because I'm not an inspector, and the inspectors who were investigating that, their fact-finding mission investigation was compromised before they could have alleged what was responsible for the alleged attacks.
It didn't happen, but there's no...
Okay, so now the debate transitions to the helicopters, and notice that Jackson Hinkle doesn't have a good explanation for helicopters either. And listen to the nonsensical thing he says about how it would be illogical for helicopters to fly low to the ground. But that's precisely what they do. If you want to avoid fire, radar, etc., you fly low to the ground. If he'd read, for example, Mark Owen's No Easy Day, he'd know that, yeah, you fly low to the ground. But see if you notice where he messes that one up.
So, with that being said, what about the numerous witness reports of the helicopter? The Syrian government was the only agency that had any control of the airspace over Douma. The Syrian rebel forces just didn't. I haven't found any evidence that they had a functioning air force in that region. So, what about all the witnesses who spoke not only to the OPCW claiming this, but also to journalistic organizations that showed up before the OPCW could?
What regarding what?
The existence of the helicopter, the 2 helicopters that flew in the air over Douma, the 2 helicopters that were found to have deported from the Douma Air Base just 15 minutes before they arrived at that location in Douma. And the fact, we could also rope in the fact that the damage done to the 2 buildings that had the cylinders dropped in them were consistent with damage done by very heavy cylinders being dropped from a couple hundred meters.
So a few things on that. First of all, the OPCW investigators found tons of inconsistencies in the testimonies of the people on scene who you allege to be witnesses of these helicopters, these 2 Russian helicopters. But what I will say is it's possible that there were helicopters. Listen, please listen. Just let me finish. There is a possibility that there were helicopters. I don't know their flight routes on that given day. But what I will say is that it is highly unlikely that you had 2 helicopters flying that close to the ground in an area that was controlled by Jaish al-Islam, which is a Saudi-backed extremist militia group that had advanced artillery access that could have easily, shot those 2 helicopters out of the sky. It makes no sense that they would have done that, especially considering that they were just on the verge of regaining control
rebel-controlled cities. They do that all the time.
They were just on the verge of regaining control of Douma. Jaish al-Islam had already began to release a few of the prisoners earlier that week on Wednesday. So it would make no sense for them to have done that because they knew...
helicopter bombings... first of all, they were currently shelling the city. And second of all, helicopter bombings from the Syrian Air Force take place constantly.
Okay, this section is kind of long, but, as you'll see, Jackson can explain about the witnesses seeing the helicopters. He does get a little bit of a got you there, because Vaush mentions, the witnesses seeing the helicopter drop the cylinder, and apparently no one did. But, still, the fact that witnesses saw helicopters, that cylinders were in the building, it seems to, the most likely explanation is that they were dropped there. But, Jackson does get a little bit of a got you there, but, you'll notice he can't explain why so many witnesses saw the helicopters at the time that people started dying.
Oh, Why did all of those dozens of witnesses confirm they saw helicopters drop those bombs on locations 2 and 4?
I didn't say that they were paid off. I said that the OPCW investigators who were on the ground found inconsistencies with the witnesses on the ground.
Their witness testimonies, of course, they're going to find inconsistencies, but the overwhelming majority of people at that area confirmed that they saw helicopters drop those bombs.
Okay, and
it's a war situation. Of course, there are going to be some
and
inconsistencies.
the ballistic and engineering experts who were on the ground investigating this, they said that there was no evidence to suffice that the helicopters definitively dropped those alleged chemical cylinders into the buildings. And that's your principal claim. That's what I want to talk about.
Are you referring to Ian Henderson right now?
Yes.
Look at these, but you still need to explain to me why so many witnesses saw helicopters at the scene dropping those bombs.
And no. Witnesses do not claim to have seen them dropping the chemical cylinders. That is
they claim that helicopters were present over the site at the exact instant people started dying. Okay?
That is a gross misrepresentation. See, you're already moving back on your claims because you know that was an incorrect statement. No one claims to have seen them dropping those cylinders. And in addition to that, the inspector, Ian Henderson, who I just pointed out here, is part of
So wait, can you answer the question? Did they hallucinate the helicopters, or did helicopters from the Syrian government just happen to be directly overhead right as the false flag happened?
I'm not going to purport to know that. The investigators didn't look into that, but what I will say is that the witnesses don't claim that they dropped the cylinders, and Ian Henderson, who was a part of the fact-finding mission team, the ODG said that it was happy if the visits to the cylinders and hospital are led by Ian Henderson.
Helicopters when they left.
Vaush, you just tried to discredit the guy who did the report that found that there was no evidence that those were dropped from a helicopter, the cylinders were dropped from a helicopter.
We're not talking about the cylinders yet. We're talking about
what have we been talking about for the last few minutes? What have I been imagining? That's exactly.
The reason why this conversation feels like it's really discontinuous is because every time you can't answer a question, you move to the next one that you do have links prepared for.
I just backed it up with the actual leaked documents. I just did it.
Okay, so you have no alternate explanation for the presence of helicopters at the scene.
What's that?
You have no alternate explanation for helicopters at the scene.
There's one witness, according to the witness testimonies, who alleged to have seen this helicopter. Beyond that, there's no information surrounding them having dropped cylinders, which is your principal claim.
We're not talking about dropped cylinders. We're talking about the helicopters. One claim at a time. And no, it's not one witness. There were many witnesses that corroborated this information. There were people who talked with NGOs and journalistic organizations immediately after the attacks took place.
Well, the original report says that around hour 1900, I just pulled this up, on the same day, a witness reported seeing a helicopter. So that's just one witness. I don't know if you have more, but your principal claim is that the helicopter was responsible for dropping the chemical cylinders. But
I'm just saying there were helicopters there. Again, you keep jumping to the next claim.
Let's just say that. Let's just say I'll agree with you that a witness claimed to have seen a helicopter. Let's just go with that, and let's continue on.
Wait, multiple witnesses, not one witness. There were dozens of them that corroborated that information.
So this is the point of the debate where Vaush, is trying to put the story together and say, okay, this is what I think happened. What do you think happened? And you'll notice there's no coherent story that comes out of Jackson Hinkle. It's just conspiracies. They'll just read this talking point or that talking point. Whereas Vaush is like, okay, here's a very simple explanation for what happened. Yours is really convoluted and weird. But anyway, I'll just let you watch for yourself.
Okay, so let's try to build this up piece by piece. So do you acknowledge that there were chlorine gas canisters found at locations 2 and 4?
There were cylinders there.
Okay. And do you acknowledge that the cylinders were consistent with the method and the technique that would traditionally be used to deploy a chlorine chemical weapons attack?
What are you alleging is a typical way to deploy a chemical weapons attack? Are you referring to dropping by a helicopter?
No, I mean that the canisters themselves were of the appropriate dimensions, contained the appropriate mechanical components to contain highly pressurized chlorine gas. Essentially, that these are the types of munitions that would be used to do such a thing. These are also consistent, basically, with the types of designs that have been used in previous chemical weapons attacks in Syria.
So, I don't contest that.
Okay. How do you suspect those arrived there?
The investigation concluded that there was no evidence that a helicopter dropped them, first of all. And they said,
wait, hold
they
on.
were, no, I'm not done.
Request
Let me
that you
finish.
please use specific language, not the investigation. The investigation didn't make the claims you're making. You're talking about the personal report from Ian Henderson, the one that was never published.
The engineering investigation, which, as let
There
me
was
just
there were
pull.
other engineering investigations. You're talking specifically about the one that was published by, not published even, that was produced by Ian Henderson. Just be specific with your language, okay? There were other engineering reports that disagreed with what he said. You're talking just about Ian Henderson.
The engineering report that was asked to have been led by Ian Henderson, yes. And that report found that there was a higher probability, I'm quoting this, that both cylinders were manually placed rather than being delivered from aircraft. And then it goes on, at location 4, where a cylinder was found on the bed, the study determined that the cylinder was too large to have penetrated the hole in the roof above. At the other site, location 2, the observed damage to the cylinder and to the roof it allegedly penetrated were incompatible with an aircraft bombing. Ballistic experts, and this part is not a quote, ballistic experts also said it was more likely that the crater had been made by an explosion, probably an artillery round, a rocket, or a mortar. With both cylinders, the study concluded, and I'm quoting again, the alternative hypothesis that the cylinders were manually placed and that the craters were caused by other means produced the only plausible explanation for observations at the scene.
Okay, so is your claim then that the canisters were placed there, like manually? Like they weren't dropped from helicopters, but helicopters were seen at the location, like coincidentally? Like a bunch of witnesses saw the helicopters, but then there just happened to be these canisters there, and it was like a coincidence that those two things happened. And also that there was damage to the buildings, which like correlated with the weight and the size of the canisters being dropped from a high velocity at a high altitude.
What I'm saying is that Ian Henderson believes, according to his own engineering report, that there's a higher probability that both cylinders were manually placed rather than being delivered from aircraft.
Do you say possibility?
The higher probability.
Higher probability. Okay, well, it seems like the other engineering reports and the broader OPCW disagree with him, which is why it wasn't included in the final report.
So the other engineering reports that you're flippantly citing here, they have no evidence. They're completely redacted, and they're from anonymous experts, which we haven't been able to see yet. If this whole investigation was taken before, Vaush, let me finish. If this investigation was taken before the entire scientific advisory board of the OPCW, which is what I want to see happen, right? They could adjudicate this issue by meeting with the dissenting inspectors and all the original team members to weigh their evidence and arguments and their claims that they were censored, which you don't believe in, I guess.
This doesn't
and they could weigh all of this, and they could come to a conclusion as to what happened. But the OPCW executives have denied every single request for this to happen. So I'm curious.
No, this is more conspiracy. I'm asking you a question. Do you think they were planted there?
It's not. I'm curious if you believe that there should be a scientific advisory board panel led by the SAB into what took place here and the allegations of censorship and doctoring.
So you realize, like, you just completely moved away from what we were talking about to a broader conspiracy about censorship. Let's talk about what we were actually talking about before you pivoted off of it. Do you think that those canisters were just planted there?
I'm alleging exactly what Ian Henderson's investigation found, that there's a higher probability it concluded both cylinders were manually placed, okay, than being delivered from aircraft.
Believe that? You believe that they were planted there?
I'm alleging that there's a higher probability, and the investigation was cut short before they could come to a determination as to what happened. But yes, a lot of the evidence does point in the direction that they were manually placed.
You haven't answered any of the direct questions. Were cylinders,
and you never cited your source
planted?
that Ian
Wait,
Henderson
I'm
believed that
asking
there was
you
a chemical
question
attack.
about your belief. I'm asking you a question about your belief, so you can't keep weaseling out of your insane conspiracy.
You weaseled out of citing the claim that Ian Henderson believed there was a chemical attack. But let's continue.
You can't contest the official narrative.
You're a pathological liar. But let's continue.
Please, wait, please. You can't contest the official narrative and then not have another reasonable explanation. There has to be another reason why this happened. Why corpses were found with foam in their mouth. Wait, hold on. Why corpses were found foaming at the mouth. Why, for example, so many people saw helicopters over the city. So now I'm asking you, how did these chlorine gas canisters get at locations 2 and 4? And furthermore, how was there damage done to the buildings, which was consistent with an aerial deployment of these canisters? Did they look around for buildings that looked like they had recently been shelled and then ran up there with an empty chlorine gas canister and then dropped it there and nobody saw this?
It wasn't consistent. The ballistics experts said that it was more likely that the crater... Are you going to listen? It was more likely that the crater had been made by an explosion, probably from an artillery round, a rocket, or a mortar. With both cylinders, the study concluded the alternative hypothesis that the cylinders were manually placed and that the craters were caused by other means produced the only plausible explanation for observations at the scene.
Which study?
That is Ian Henderson's report that has not been contested by the OPCW executives.
And stop saying the ballistic experts when what you mean is the one guy's completely unverified report. Can you please stop pretending there are more people on your side than actually are by not naming the people who we've already directly implicated in the broader conversation?
Vaush,
just say Ian Henderson's report, okay? Now,
Vaush, the investigation...
how did the cylinders get there?
Vaush, that is the principal argument that I'm trying to make here. That this investigation was cut short, and the key investigators were forced off the fact-finding mission team before they could complete their investigation. That is the exact argument that I'm making, and that's why I want to see this taken before a scientific advisory board of the OPCW, so we can identify and weigh out all the evidence on both sides, and come to a conclusion as to whether there was a cover-up and potentially start another investigation as to who was responsible for this attack.
How did the cylinders get there? They weigh about 180 pounds. They were brought up to 2 locations. One of them had a harness on it that was so large it would be difficult to fit through narrow hallways. How did they get up there when no witnesses, not even witnesses that the Syrian government or the Russian government interviewed, attested to have seen people planting that stuff?
So Henderson's report was focused specifically on the issue of how the cylinders got there, not whether there was a chemical attack or anything like that. So he doesn't purport to know who was responsible for placing them. His investigation was how they got
there. My narrative is really simple. Why were there people who died with foam in their mouths? Why were these buildings blown out without there being any shrapnel nearby? Why did these people die? Why were there canisters there? Why were there helicopters there? Oh, the helicopters dropped chlorine bombs, something that Assad has done many other times.
No. There's absolutely no evidence that has been made public or published publicly by the OPCW, which suggests that aircraft bombing was responsible for those alleged chemical cylinders getting there. In addition to that, the cylinders the report produced the only plausible explanation for the observations at the scene were manual placement. And Vaush, I haven't even gotten to this yet. I haven't even gotten to this yet, but I think this is important. This is important. Relating.
Okay, here's a part where Vaush rage quits. The debate goes on a little longer. Jackson Hinkle doesn't make any points. And at one point, Vaush is talking, and Jackson Hinkle starts saying, "Oh, you're full of crap, you're lying, blah, blah, blah." And then later, he quotes Vaush as saying something he didn't actually say. And at that point, Vaush kind of loses it and rage quits, and Jackson Hinkle does the whole, "Oh, I'm going to flex my muscles because I won this debate." And I'll let you see for yourself.
The only possibility is that they were manually placed. So I'm curious, What is your smoking gun evidence that these were dropped from a helicopter? I'm just gonna let you eat yourself alive on this one.
For a basic alternate explanation for how they got there. This is specialty equipment that weighs an enormous amount that would have been incredibly difficult to transport, yet no witnesses saw it happen, and we have videos of people scrambling and like dying right after this hits like the top floor of one of the buildings. There's like a video
You're making stuff
of
up
people
now.
like choking and hold on,
You're just talking out of your ass right now. You're saying, oh, there was.
Wait, hold on, please. There's like a video of like people screaming and dying as like a chlorine bomb is half poking through a
there's a
portion
video?
of the ceiling.
That would have been so helpful for Ian Henderson to have when he was doing this investigation.
God, I'm begging you so hard.
That would have been so helpful for Ian Henderson to have that video, Vaush. I can't believe you've had the video this entire time, but you haven't shown it to all of us yet. You want to show us the video of the chemical cylinders being dropped?
I can't wait. It's not a video of the chemical cylinders being dropped. It's a video of people panicking after the chlorine gas starts being disseminated into one of the buildings.
Oh,
I
that's
can't show it on my screen.
way different, Vaush, because you just said that there was a video of helicopters dropping, and I'll give you one. You didn't say chemical cylinders. You said of items being dropped. You said there was a video of items being dropped. So I'll give you one. You said that, but where's that video? Because you just said there was a video of that.
Is there a third person in here?
What are you talking about?
Are you hearing somebody else's claims? Is there a third individual here making claims that I haven't made?
You just said realize
all this is being recorded, right?
You just said there was
okay. It's a video of the chlorine bomb partially in the building and people freaking out and around. I can't show it on my stream because it's TOS. It's not like a secret video. I can link it to you if you want. It's like
are you referring to the hospital scene?
No, I'm not. I know you're very really want to do the white helmets thing, but no, I'm not. I'm talking about in the building.
You mean like I want to talk about the thing that has absolutely
oh my God, you can't.
standing?
So you have no alternate explanation for the placement of the canisters. This is the third thing you're saying you just have no explanation for.
Vaush, what I'm saying, you're just baselessly saying that Ian Henderson's report is bogus, right? I mean, what are your claims that Ian Henderson's report was bogus?
You can't answer it, dude. Oh, okay. All right, let's move to the next one then.
No, because Ian Henderson's report was peer-reviewed. Okay. It was peer-reviewed, and he consulted with experts for this report.
Peer-reviewed? Who reviewed it?
The members of the fact-finding mission team and independent ballistic missile experts.
Independent ballistic missile experts. So why did all of the independent engineering investigations afterwards disagree with Ian Henderson's report? That's not what peer review means, by the way.
I'd be so curious to find that out, but unfortunately, the OPCW hasn't made any of those investigations public, and the only investigation that has been made, you're referring to 3 different investigations by independent experts. None of those have been made public. The only public investigation we have is Ian Henderson's, and it's been peer-reviewed. And I'm still waiting on that video where you said there was a helicopter dropping stuff on a building.
Peer review is an academic process. It doesn't mean other people have read this document. That's not what peer review means.
So what are your claims that it was bogus? Because you said there was a video showing something being dropped from a helicopter onto the buildings, but you haven't been able to show me that video. You haven't shown me that video.
Of this conversation that it's either going to be dishonesty or mental illness, and I'm leaning towards the latter one right now because this is like schizophrenia. Like, are you hearing shit I'm not saying?
Well, you said there was a video, and there's no video.
They tell you to kill?
And you also can never cite the claim that Ian Henderson believed there was a chemical attack. I'm still waiting on that as well.
You need to get these voices checked out, okay? This is some serious shit that you really need to. I really hope they don't tell you to like, kill or hurt people.
I cannot wait to clip this all up. I cannot wait to clip this all up. You know, your lack of preparation really shows.
Because
reading Wikipedia and Bellingcat at like 3 a.m. clearly didn't help your case. Neither did Patrick Hillsman's DMs.
What about Patrick Hillsman's? You know, it's funny.
Where's the video, Vaush?
This really does feel like a point. Does it make you uncomfortable that, like, I'm feeling like I'm arguing with a Holocaust denier right now?
Vaush, where is the video?
Wait, does that make you... Wait, you actually want the video of, like, people
send
dying?
It to me. Because you said there was a video from... showing a helicopter dropping something on. You didn't say it was chemical cylinders.
I can't prove claims I literally haven't seen made. Okay, you can go back and review the VOD if you want. You're free to clip it. That didn't happen. Okay, please listen to me and not to the voices in your head. That wasn't said.
Cool. We will just move on from
Do you
that
want
and
the
accept the
video I was
fact that you're
actually
wrong.
referring to? So in this video, like, I can't show it on my stream, but like there's pretty clearly a gas canister and people freaking out. Did like people plant the gas canister and then got a bunch of crisis actors who later died to like freak out on camera and then they died with foam at their mouths?
No one's
Like,
no one's
here, I'll
alleging.
send you the video. Can
no,
you give me
no,
an explanation for this?
Vaush,
This
no
was
one's
uploaded
alleging.
the day
No
of the
one's
attack,
alleging
by
that
the
the
way.
people who died were crisis actors. People are alleging.
Then
Ian
can
Henderson.
you explain this
Ian
video?
Henderson is alleging that yes, like you just said, the canister was manually placed. So I'm glad you've been able to understand that now. And you asked who peer reviewed this. I told you. It was the members of the fact-finding mission
keep
team,
doing this conversation
and
if you
also
literally can't
OPCW
answer
executives
questions.
have never been able to debunk his claims with public investigations or reports.
Wait, so do you believe in crisis actors?
I don't believe that you said the people who died, I'm alleging, are crisis actors. I've never alleged that.
I just sent you a video. There are people scrambling and freaking out, and you can see a gas canister. They are acting the way you'd expect them to if their house just got hit by a chlorine gas canister. Is this video faked? Did somebody run in there, plant the gas canister on the roof, and then get the camera ready and have a bunch of people freak out, and then later people in this video were found as corpses? Is that, like, the thing that happened?
So the white helmets who are running around Douma and the site of the scene who are alleging that there was a gas attack, I believe those individuals were construing a false narrative. Yes.
This isn't white helmets. This isn't white helmets.
Well,
I know you
Vaush,
keep wanting to pivot to
Vaush,
that because you have like prepared talking points, but this is
Vaush,
not white helmets.
Vaush, let's just go point by point here. If you believe if you believe, and I'm not saying you do, but let's say you believed Ian Henderson's report that
He can't.
What?
Oh, wait. If we're at the point now where you're so obviously aware that you've been blown the fuck out that you will literally not participate in a conversation that we are having,
No. Ian
then we might
Henderson's
as well just end
report
it here.
said that the
I've already given you more
ballistic-
attention than you
Ian
deserve. I know
Henderson's
you were
report-
desperate to get my attention. If
Ian
we're
Henderson,
literally at this point
Ian
now,
Henderson's report said that it was more likely that the crater had been made by an explosion, probably from an
we're at that
artillery
point.
round,
Okay.
rocket, or mortar.
have fun, my
that
dude.
the cylinders
Talking
were
to you was identical
that the
to talking with a
cylinders were
neo-Nazi. There's
manually
literally no
placed.
difference between you people.
That these cylinders were manually placed, and it was likely an artillery round, a rocket, or mortar that caused the explosion. Okay, so if you had an explosion that went off, and you had white helmets who were running around yelling that this was a chemical attack, wouldn't you probably be freaking out? Hello? Oh, he must have. I don't know what happened. Did he mute himself? He's still talking. I think he hang up on me? Does anyone know? He hung up. Rage quit. Vaush mad.
Okay, so what would I say is the most logical conclusion to this debate? I think the best way to look at it is to use an analogy. Say you go to a football game, and then when you walk back to your car, you notice that the window has been smashed and there's a brick on your front seat. What's the most logical explanation? I think most people would say, well, the most logical explanation is someone threw a brick through your window. And imagine Jackson Hinkle comes along and he starts talking about the Illuminati and the White Helmets and Ian Henderson and all these conspiracies. And then you say, okay, if you think it was something else, what do you think it was? And, he just evades and plays games. And that's what I feel this happened in this debate. What we got is we got buildings with holes in the ceiling. We got cylinders, for chlorine gas. We have people who are dead, frothing at the mouth. And, the simplest explanation is, some helicopter came, dropped these big heavy cylinders, and the chlorine gas killed people. And throughout this whole debate, Jackson Hinkle doesn't provide any plausible explanation. He just plays games. And, that's my conclusion. I think even though Vaush rage quit, I think if you look at it logically, I think he won the debate.